Welcome to Official History World, where history comes alive. Explore the events, empires, and people that shaped our world. Subscribe and be part of our journey through time.
In the grand, sprawling narrative of human history, there are moments that stand out as profound turning points. These are not always grand battles or the signing of treaties. Sometimes the entire course of civilization pivots on a single, violent act. The assassination of a leader is one such event, a sudden, brutal punctuation mark that can rewrite the future of a nation and, honestly, even the world. It is a stark reminder of the fragility of power, the volatility of human ambition, and the deep, often unpredictable currents that shape our societies. The loss is not merely of one individual, but of a potential future, a path not taken. These acts of violence send shockwaves that ripple across generations. They can plunge a nation into chaos, ignite the flames of war, or extinguish the fragile embers of peace. The motivations behind them are as varied as humanity itself: political ideology, personal grievance, religious extremism, or the cold calculus of power. Each story is a complex tapestry of betrayal, ambition, and consequence, a tragedy that forces us to confront the darker aspects of our own nature. The echo of the assassin's strike can be heard for centuries, shaping borders, ideologies, and the very fabric of our global community. Today, we journey back to these pivotal moments. We will explore 10 instances where the world held its breath, where the death of a single leader irrevocably altered the path of history. I invite you to join me, to look closely at these events not just as historical footnotes, but as profound lessons. Consider how a single life, and its sudden end, can unleash forces that reshape our world. Let us reflect on the immense and often terrifying power held within a single decisive moment. We begin in the heart of the ancient world, in Rome, a republic teetering on the brink of empire. Here, one man, Julius Caesar, had risen to a position of unparalleled power. A brilliant general, a charismatic politician, he was loved by the masses but feared by the senatorial elite who saw in him the death of their cherished republic. They whispered of tyranny, of a king in all but name. On the Ides of March in 44 BC, these whispers turned into a deadly conspiracy, not from a foreign enemy, but from within his own circle, from men he considered allies, even friends. As he entered the theater of Pompey, the chosen venue for a Senate meeting, he was surrounded. These were not common assassins, but esteemed senators, their daggers concealed within their togas. One by one they struck, a frenzied and brutal attack. The ultimate betrayal came from Marcus Junius Brutus, a man Caesar had treated almost as a son. The act was meant to restore the republic, to sever the head of a perceived tyrant and let the body of government heal. Instead, it plunged Rome into more than a decade of bloody civil war, a power vacuum that destroyed the very institution the conspirators had sought to save. We travel now across the Atlantic and forward in time, to a nation just emerging from the crucible of its own self-destruction. The American Civil War was over. The Union had been preserved, but the cost was immense, the wounds deep and raw. In this fragile peace stood President Abraham Lincoln, the architect of victory, and the man tasked with the monumental challenge of healing a divided country. His vision was one of malice toward none, with charity for all, a path of reconciliation and reconstruction. It was a vision he would never see realized. On the evening of Good Friday, April 14, 1865, Lincoln sought a rare moment of respite at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. The nation was celebrating the end of the war, and a sense of relief filled the air. But in the shadows lurked John Wilkes Booth, a well-known actor and a fervent Confederate sympathizer. He saw Lincoln not as a savior, but as a tyrant who had crushed his beloved South. Slipping into the presidential box unnoticed, he fired a single, fatal shot. The act plunged a nation, just beginning to exhale in relief, back into the depths of shock and mourning, robbing it of the one leader who might have guided it through the treacherous waters of Reconstruction with grace and forgiveness. In the mid-20th century, the world was locked in the icy grip of the Cold War. It was an era of profound anxiety, but also of great hope and dynamism, embodied by the youthful and charismatic President of the United States, John F. Kennedy. He and his family represented a new generation, a sense of glamour and forward-thinking optimism that captivated not just America, but the globe. His presidency was a time of immense tension, from the Cuban Missile Crisis to the burgeoning conflict in Vietnam, yet he projected an image of cool-headed leadership, a beacon of the new frontier. That beacon was extinguished on a bright, sunny afternoon in Dallas, Texas, on November 22, 1963. As his motorcade wound its way through Dealey Plaza, shots rang out, striking the president. The moments that followed were captured on film, a horrifying, surreal sequence that would be replayed endlessly, seared into the collective consciousness of a generation. The news spread with breathtaking speed, plunging the world into a state of shared disbelief and profound grief. For many, the assassination of JFK marked the end of an age of innocence, a moment that shattered the nation's optimism and gave rise to an era of cynicism and conspiracy that, honestly, still lingers to this day. Our journey now takes us to India, a nation newly born from the ashes of colonial rule. Its independence was the life's work of one extraordinary man, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. He was not a president or a king, but a spiritual and political leader known to the world as Mahatma, the Great Soul. His philosophy of nonviolent resistance, or satyagraha, had humbled the mighty British Empire and inspired liberation movements across the globe. He was a living symbol of peace, a moral compass for a world weary of war and oppression. In the aftermath of independence, however, the subcontinent was torn apart by violent partition. On January 30, 1948, as Gandhi made his way to a prayer meeting in New Delhi, he was confronted by Nathuram Godse, a Hindu nationalist who held Gandhi responsible for what he saw as the appeasement of Muslims during the partition. Godse bowed, then fired 3 shots at point-blank range. The assassination of the world's foremost apostle of nonviolence by an act of supreme violence was a tragedy of staggering irony. It was a devastating blow to a young nation, robbing it of its founding father and a voice of moral clarity when it was needed most. Sometimes a single death can be the catalyst for the death of millions. Such was the case in the summer of 1914, in the Bosnian city of Sarajevo. The Austro-Hungarian Empire was a patchwork of ethnicities, a powder keg of nationalist tensions. Visiting the city was Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the empire's throne. His presence was seen as a provocation by Serbian nationalists who dreamed of a unified Slavic state, free from Austrian rule. A secret society, the Black Hand, planned to make a violent statement. Their initial attempt on the morning of June 28 failed. A bomb thrown at the Archduke's motorcade missed its target. But later that day, fate intervened. A wrong turn by the driver placed the Archduke's car directly in front of one of the conspirators, a young man named Gavrilo Princip. Seizing his chance, Princip fired 2 shots, killing both the Archduke and his wife Sophie. This single act of political violence, seemingly a regional dispute, set off a catastrophic chain reaction. A web of military alliances, imperial ambitions, and long-simmering resentments was activated, plunging Europe and then the world into the unprecedented slaughter of the First World War. In the long and troubled history of the Middle East, genuine moments of hope for peace are precious and fragile. The early 1990s was one such moment. After decades of conflict, Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, a former general and war hero, had embarked on a courageous and controversial path toward peace with the Palestinians, culminating in the Oslo Accords. For his efforts, he, along with Shimon Peres and Yasser Arafat, was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. He was a pragmatist who understood that security for his people could ultimately only be achieved through peace with their neighbors. On the night of November 4, 1995, Rabin attended a massive peace rally in Tel Aviv. The atmosphere was euphoric, a celebration of the possibility of a new future. After addressing the cheering crowd as he walked to his car, he was shot 3 times in the back. The assassin was not a foreign enemy, but a fellow Israeli, a right-wing extremist named Yigal Amir, who was fanatically opposed to the peace process and believed Rabin was betraying his country. The murder of the man who had become the very embodiment of the peace process dealt a devastating blow to that hope, derailing negotiations and deepening the divisions he had worked so hard to overcome. The political landscape of Pakistan has often been a turbulent arena, marked by military coups and struggles for democratic rule. In this arena, the Bhutto family name looms large. Benazir Bhutto, daughter of a former prime minister who was himself executed, rose to become the first woman to lead a Muslim-majority nation in the modern era. Her political career was, honestly, a roller coaster of triumphs and tribulations. She served 2 non-consecutive terms as prime minister, both ending in dismissal amidst allegations of corruption, followed by years in self-imposed exile. In 2007, she returned to Pakistan to contest new elections, her presence seen by many as a powerful challenge to military rule and a hope for a return to democracy. She knew the risks were immense, having already survived one assassination attempt upon her return. On December 27, 2007, after addressing a rally in Rawalpindi, she stood up through the sunroof of her vehicle to wave to her supporters. It was in that moment that an attacker shot at her before detonating a bomb. Her death threw Pakistan into turmoil, intensifying political instability and leaving a void in the country's democratic movement that is still felt today. For decades, Egypt had been at the forefront of the Arab world's conflict with Israel. But in the late 1970s, its leader, President Anwar Sadat, made a move that, honestly, stunned the world. He chose a path of diplomacy over conflict, traveling to Jerusalem and speaking before the Israeli Knesset, an act of almost unimaginable courage. This bold initiative led directly to the Camp David Accords in 1978 and a historic peace treaty between Egypt and Israel the following year. Sadat, along with Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin, was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. While he was hailed as a hero of peace in the West, his actions made him a pariah in much of the Arab world and a traitor in the eyes of religious extremists within his own country. The price for his courage would be his life. On October 6, 1981, during an annual military parade in Cairo commemorating the Yom Kippur War, a group of soldiers, part of a radical Islamist cell, broke from the ranks. They stormed the presidential viewing stand, firing indiscriminately. Sadat was hit multiple times and died shortly after. His assassination was a brutal message to any other Arab leader who might consider a similar path, chilling peace efforts in the region for years to come. Indira Gandhi, the daughter of India's first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, was a formidable and often controversial figure who dominated Indian politics for nearly 2 decades. She was a strong, decisive leader, guiding India through war, famine, and significant social change. However, her tenure was also marked by a period of authoritarian rule known as the Emergency and by deep internal strife. One of the most severe challenges came from a Sikh separatist movement seeking an independent state called Khalistan, based in the Holy Golden Temple in Amritsar. In June 1984, to flush out the militants, she ordered the Indian Army to storm the temple in an action codenamed Operation Blue Star. The operation was successful in its military objective, but was seen as a desecration by many Sikhs, deeply wounding the community's pride and religious sentiment. The consequences were tragically personal. On the morning of October 31, 1984, as she walked through the garden of her residence in New Delhi, she was assassinated by 2 of her own bodyguards, both of whom were Sikhs seeking revenge for the storming of the temple. Her death triggered horrific anti-Sikh riots, a dark chapter in the nation's history, born from a cycle of violence and retribution. The story of Patrice Lumumba is a tragic testament to the brutal realities of decolonization and the Cold War. In 1960, the Belgian Congo gained its independence, and Lumumba became its first democratically elected prime minister. He was a passionate nationalist, a charismatic orator who dreamed of a truly independent and unified nation, free from the economic and political shackles of its former colonial master, Belgium. His vision was one of Pan-African unity and control over his country's vast mineral wealth, which had long been exploited by foreign powers. This fierce independence immediately put him at odds with both Belgium and the United States, who feared he might align with the Soviet Union and deny them access to the Congo's strategic resources, particularly uranium. Within months of his election, a secessionist crisis backed by Belgian interests erupted. Lumumba was deposed in a coup, arrested, and handed over to his political enemies. In January 1961, with the complicity of Belgian officers and the tacit approval of the CIA, he was brutally executed. His murder was not just the killing of a man, but the killing of a young nation's hope, paving the way for decades of dictatorship, conflict, and foreign exploitation. The stories we have revisited are more than just dramatic tales from the past. They are living history, their consequences woven into the fabric of the world we inhabit today. The fall of Caesar heralded the end of the Roman Republic and the birth of an empire whose legacy still shapes our laws and languages. The shot in Sarajevo unleashed a war that redrew the map of the world. The death of a peacemaker in the Middle East or a democratic hopeful in Pakistan creates a vacuum that is too often filled by extremism and instability. These are not isolated events. They are seismic shocks whose aftershocks continue to be felt. Each assassination represents a fundamental question: what might have been? What if Lincoln had lived to oversee Reconstruction with his vision of charity? What if Rabin had completed the peace process? What if Lumumba had been allowed to build the nation he envisioned? These are questions we can never answer, but they force us to confront the immense and often devastating impact of political violence. A single act, driven by ideology or hatred, can divert the river of history, leaving future generations to navigate a vastly different and often more treacherous landscape. The ghosts of these leaders, and the futures they might have built, haunt us still. As we conclude, I urge you to think about these lasting consequences. The world is a complex, interconnected system, and the removal of a key figure can trigger unforeseen and enduring changes. The lessons from these tragedies are stark reminders of the importance of peaceful dialogue, the dangers of extremism, and the profound responsibility that rests on the shoulders of those who lead. Now, I turn to you. Which of these assassinations do you believe had the most profound and lasting impact on world history? Share your thoughts and reflections in the comments below.